I will say, Anthony, that the pro days are interesting because I think that they're hugely important. Unfortunately, I think the part that's important we don't really get to see. What's really important about the pro days is the time spent. The time spent with, Drake May at dinner or breakfast, I think they did with Drake May and dinner with Jaden Daniels. Two pretty important meals back to back. And I'm not talking about the nutritional value. But for Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and who knows who else was a part of those conversations. And then I assume that like later on down the process, you do your 30 visit. And if I'm Josh Harris, I want a few minutes with my potential franchise quarterback. I want to see how you react in that situation. Not that unless it's like I just get a really bad feel off the kid, I'm not going to be like, you guys can or can't. I'm not going to make the sweeping judgments, but I think it's an owner's right on a number 2 overall pick, a franchise-changing type of decision to especially someone who's been as successful and hired as many good people as Josh Harris has, to have a few minutes or at least be a part of a meeting where he gets to experience what the kid's like. I know he's obviously watched in on some of them that got reported out at the Combine. But at the end of the day, I think that stuff is important. But the other big thing that is interesting to me is how you perform specifically in the areas where we've got questions. And I think for Drake May, the footwork stuff was a huge deal. And I even said, I think on this show a couple weeks ago, might have been on Take Command, but I think I said it here. And like the footwork for May, I want to see what it looks like at the pro day, because he really has a chance to like not silence the critics, but to push back on some of that and be like, no, like my offensive line, that was some of the issues. And, not that he was going to throw him under the bus, but that if he came out clean, you could write it off. There were reasons that it could certainly explain why he struggled with the consistency in some of those areas. And instead he came out yesterday, and while the last 10 minutes of the pro day, were incredible, and he's throwing the ball down the field and it looks really good. You also have the reality that he sailed some throws because his feet were terrible. And I just don't know what to do with that information. And luckily I don't have to do anything but relay it. I don't have to go make a decision off of it. And certainly I don't think it's the kind of thing where, one bad throw at a pro day is the separator of drafting a guy or not. But what you're really trying to get at there is like, how hard did you work at this weakness in your game? How coachable is it for you? And if when the lights are on, you default back to the bad stuff, like it can't mean nothing. I guess that's where I struggle, right? Like I'd love to talk to a head coach, a quarterback coach, a GM. And we've got plenty of people that we can call next week and kind of break this stuff down. But I would love to know, like, if that's the whole point of the exercise. And again, he does show off why he's more than worthy of a number 2 overall pick and the high upside and all that kind of stuff. But if the thing that we're looking for is the ability to overcome and correct the flaws that we have, and then he comes out and he shows those, what do we do with that information? Because at the end of the day, Drake May's pro day had everything Drake May has on film. He's got some of the most incredible throws you've ever seen. I mean, and did you actually watch any of the highlights or, we couldn't watch the throwing session live because it was during our show, but like how much of it did you go back and watch?
I watched a decent amount of it. And there's cut-ups all over Twitter, on YouTube.
Yeah.
And, he made some crazy throws. He definitely did airmail a couple, but the throws that he did connect on down the field, like on the run,
dude,
pretty impressive.
Some of the stuff he did, and it was cool to see it like in the script and be like, but you also were looking at it like, oh, those are throws that guys like Mahomes make. Those are throws that guys like Josh Allen make. Like, we're going to roll to our right, and as we're kind of leaning to our right, our body's slanted, our feet aren't set, it's more or less off your back foot. I'm going to laser/layer. Somehow you have the velocity and the right trajectory, a ball to a receiver 20 yards down the field. And like, that's an NFL throw. Now, to do it against air with no defenders isn't quite NFL difficult by any stretch of the imagination, but that kind of stuff is special. And that kind of stuff gets you first downs, and that kind of stuff scores you touchdowns. Like, how many times do plays break down in the red zone, and you have to have a guy that can shift, move, shift, bang, and deliver a dart through a couple defenders. And like Drake May showed, he can do that. And then it becomes the question. This to me is, again, like the magic here of trying to figure out who's your guy in this class is, if you care about that stuff most, Drake May's your guy. If you want a guy that just has unlimited potential, it feels like, Drake May's your guy. But if you care more about making the layups, Drake May showed he might not be your guy, because some of the short, quick stuff, some of the easy out stuff that should be easy throws by NFL's quarterback standards, especially high-level quarterback standards, like, ball made a real loud sound off the bleachers that it hit when he overshot that out. And I kind of had to laugh. Like, Bucky Brooks is awesome. This isn't meant to be a shot at Bucky. But, like, Bucky Brooks was talking on the NFL Network coverage about how, like, oh, he showed the ability to bounce back. I'm like, yeah, he missed a layup, and then he made another layup. I'm not giving you credit for that. Don't miss the first layup. You don't get credit for bouncing back when you didn't, like, the thing, like, there's no pressure there. You just got another free rep, and you did it, something that should be 100% completion percentage. You got 50 on. So there's that. But there's some interesting comments that come out of these pro days as well. We got some sound, including, are we gonna go down the Brian Kelly Zapruder film rabbit hole? What did Brian Kelly say that had everyone up in arms yesterday? We'll get to that, and then a discussion about quarterback and fit that had Logan Paulson pretty jacked up when we were done with it. It was one of those where we finished the podcast, and he goes, "I'm really proud of that." That conversation, if you haven't heard it yet, coming up at 4:30. We also got Boheim Jones on the show today, talking quarterback development. Clinton Yates, Dave Johnson, of course, later. Talk a little March Madness. Before that, stacked up show here on the Team 980.
DC. I'm about to try to find the Adam.
The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. All right, coming up at the bottom of the hour, great discussion with Logan on Take Command about McCarthy, Daniels, May, the trio, and how they all potentially fit or don't here in Washington, and kind of getting to the heart of a question that I've been talking about a lot on the show and kind of hinting at and wanting to have a discussion about, which is, we say, oh, if these quarterbacks are all the same, like that affects impacts your desire potentially to trade down. But the same, it feels hard to believe that that'll be the case. It's a big if, because they're so different stylistically. And so if they're so different stylistically, like, what are you actually looking for? And I think that's what gets to the heart of what pro days are often too, because pro days are the best chance for the players to get to spend some quality time on their turf with the teams. Now, of course, if you're in the building in Ashburn, that's going to be Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and everybody's best chance. The combine is like speed dating, so you get a little bit of time there, but it's about a 15-minute meeting, and then if you can somehow sneak in a little extra time, I guess they don't let the personnel on the field, but you run into a guy in a hallway or whatever. But like generally speaking, it's the pro day. You go, like, they went to dinner with Jaden Daniels, for instance, and then whatever time you get with them in Ashburn. And so ultimately, that human evaluation is a big, enormous part of this. And if you don't believe me, just ask Adam Peters. This was Adam at the Combine, of course, the Commanders' new general manager, just at this point, almost 2 months ago. About a month ago, at the Combine, when he was asked what he looks for in a franchise quarterback and in a prospect.
I haven't met any of them in person, and really excited to meet them. We're going to meet some tonight, some tomorrow, and that's just the beginning of the process in terms of that. That's a huge part of really any position is getting to know the person. That's where we've always found in scouting, you make the biggest mistakes more so on the person than the actual talent. I think we're all here for a reason in terms of being talent evaluators, everybody in our staff, but understanding what makes the person tick and how they'll fit into your locker room and your particular culture is the biggest thing where you can make mistakes on.
Because there's a lot of quarterbacks that have the exact same arm strength, right, that have succeeded and failed. They throw the ball X miles per hour. They can layer throws. They run 4-point whatever in the 40, all of that stuff. Like, the physical traits certainly matter. They matter a lot, but they're like a prerequisite. And in your ability to get those physical traits to shine on Sundays is down to like the person and the human evaluation and how they fit with your locker room. Now, of course, there's also an evaluation of like, how's this person going to act as a professional? Because there is some self-determination. It's not just fit, but there is a self-determination element of this as well. And being able to judge that on a high level is a separator from a talent evaluation standpoint. And I wonder if we could get Adam Peters, with some truth serum, like when he sat down with Brock Purdy for the first time, did he know like, oh, this dude's got it? Probably not. Probably not. You want to know why? Because if he knew he had it like that, they wouldn't have drafted him dead last. They wouldn't have let every other team try with every other pick in the draft to take Brock Purdy. No, they had some inkling that maybe it could work out and he just might be a good person to have around. They knew he could play to the level to get them to a Super Bowl. They would have drafted him a hell of a lot earlier. Pete Carroll said that a million times about Russell Wilson. Like, yeah, it was great that they got him with the pick that they did in the third round, but if they had known he was going to be this good, then they would have taken him higher in the draft. I mean, shoot, if the Shanahans knew that Kirk was going to be Kirk and Robert was going to be Robert, they would have flipped those picks. I know it sounds crazy, but one dude's doing TV, and the other dude just signed a 4-year, $100 million contract 12 years later. So perhaps they might have not also let him out of town. Of course, that wasn't the Shanahans at that point. That's old Brucey Bruce and Dan, and that's a whole other story that everybody knows at this point. But you get the point. I think that understanding that is vitally important. And I think that there are real positives to all of these guys in that way. Like, I think McCarthy's super solid. I shared on Take Command a text that I got from Noah Eagle, who, of course, our friend who does play-by-play for the Big Ten. And Noah told me that he thinks J.J. McCarthy is the most elite or college athlete that he has ever covered. And Noah's been doing, Noah's still a young guy himself, but like he's been doing play-by-play for NBC and CBS and others for, 5-6 years now at varying levels. And he obviously was around college athletes when he was in college, covering them when he was a student at Syracuse. So like he's been around enough guys that's not saying nothing. And for him to be like, yeah, McCarthy's the best of the best. Like he's gonna do well in these interviews. But I think with May, he's also known as kind of just a ball guy. He comes from a family of athletes. I think his dad was a coach. Like you got all those types of things. And then the guy that I think is really interesting in this realm is Jaden Daniels, because he's not your traditional outgoing, big, loud voice. He's kind of soft-spoken. He's a little quieter. But I think you see, in the same way that you see it with like Lamar Jackson, a fire within that ultimately comes out if you challenge him or if you get to like really get him talking a little bit. And you see it on the field. You see him running up to Malik Neighbors and congratulating him after his 40 time. And, you see the leadership. And I thought he was great. Jaden was in his interview with Louis Riddick after his pro day earlier in the week. And he's like, I've been leading men since I was 18 years old. Like I was a freshman at Arizona State, and I walked into that locker room and we had some older guys, and immediately I was the leader. That's just how I am. So there is a confidence to him that I think will ring with a guy like Dan Quinn, that will ring with guys like Adam Peters. So I think that time is so important. Now, there's a little bit of news. I don't know if to call this news. There's a little bit of controversy, Anthony, a little bit of intrigue sparked at LSU's Pro Day because Chick Hernandez, WUSA 9, was talking with Brian Kelly, the head coach at LSU. Interesting cat, that Brian Kelly. And this happened.
He is going to be so committed to taking care of himself that you're going to have to worry about size or he doesn't weigh enough. Lamar's done a pretty good job with his size. I think Mahomes, I wouldn't consider him a giant because he's going to get the ball out to the playmakers and make plays for Washington.
For Washington? What do you know, Brian Kelly? And then people ran with that. Anthony, I have two theories here. One, Brian Kelly is just kind of a sleazy college football coach who's trying to make himself look good. And thus he's going to be like, yeah, my guy. He's just like, in his mind, he's just standing up for his guy. And we know that Brian Kelly's willing to do that kind of stuff. Grew a Southern accent when he went to LSU. One of the weirdest intro, he's at that LSU basketball game. You're just like, huh? What? The other thing is he's just kind of talking. He knows he's talking to Chick at a Washington station. And so he's like, yeah, like kind of like he could do that for Washington. And that it wasn't sinister at all. And it just was kind of him talking. Notice that neither of those theories is Brian Kelly knows what Adam Peters is thinking. Because I don't think that Adam Peters knows who he's drafting yet. And thus Brian Kelly certainly does not know.
He doesn't. I mean, Peters is and the whole regime, they've just done a great job of keeping everything to the best. Like the beat reporters have been caught off guard multiple times. So there's about a month out, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks?
We are a month because it's on the 25th.
Okay, we're a month out. Yeah, there's no chance Adam Peters knows.
No, because they just completed their pro days. They haven't had them come visit yet. Now, certainly, it's not like he doesn't know anything, right?
Yeah.
He might, and who knows? Maybe he said like, hey, if we had to pick today, it'd be this guy. But I think he's keeping that close to the vest. That's kind of how Adam Peters is known to operate. And it causes a lot of smokescreen and a lot of people to get sideways because, the last time he went through this was when he traded up to third and ultimately took Trey Lance, which is what everyone thought was going to happen all along. But there was a month of Mac Jones rumors. And so is that what's happening with JJ? Is that what's happening with Drake? I tend to think that for JJ specifically, like a lot of NFL people actually genuinely really like him. I don't think that's like Peters or anybody around the Commanders like putting out that smoke. I think that as media folks talk to NFL people, they're like, yeah, I actually really do like McCarthy, which is different than like the Will Levis stuff last year. And then, I still think that there's a really good chance. I mean, all the betting markets tell you that that Jaden is going to be the pick. And I have no problem with that either. So, and that's kind of the thing is I got no problem with any three of these guys going number 2. Why? Well, you'll hear why next in a conversation with Logan Paulson we had on Take Command. For Logan's money, this is the best quarterback conversation we've had throughout this entire process going back to January. So you definitely don't want to miss it next here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up at the top of the hour, Boheim Jones had a really interesting thought on Twitter the other day about quarterback development. So I wanted to pick his brain on that. I will also tell you, as Anthony, what was that? Why did you just play Ludacris? You know what day it is.
My bad.
What are you doing, man?
The song
professional.
I was going to play had some cursing in it, so I decided to.
Oh, that's probably good. Yeah, no, okay. You are a professional. That is for sure. But it's Beyonce Day. Cowboy Carter is out. 27 tracks, including some interludes and such. So it's not really like 27 new songs. But really amazing album from Beyonce, revolutionary, and an album that took courage. And that word I steal from Bomani. because we talked about artistic courage, and there's some sports crossover there. That part of the conversation is already on YouTube, but the sports part, the quarterback development part, we will air for you here at 5 o'clock as Bo and I caught up yesterday. Right now, though, a conversation between myself and Logan Paulson about the quarterbacks coming up in this 2024 NFL draft. Logan, so that brings us to the decision, which obviously there's more data to be gathered. There's seemingly always more data to be gathered. We got Drake May's pro day, had McCarthy's, had Jaden Daniels that we just talked about. They still have their 30 visits, and assumingly they will bring all these guys to Ashburn. And you know, we just said one of the benefits of the pro day is for the athlete is it's on their turf. Well, come on over to Ashburn and see what the turf is like there in Northern Virginia. But ultimately, they've got a decision to make between these three guys. And I know there's a lot of folks who are going to find this unbelievable, but we both, as the more we've watched McCarthy, have landed on he's in the group. He is right there with Drake May. He is right there with Jaden Daniels. There is just a ton of good film. There's not a lot of film, because there's not a lot of fluff in his film. A lot of other quarterbacks where they have more throws, a lot of those other throws are just like bubble screens or quick game where there's not really a decision to be made. And yeah, they did it. But when if you're just like make a cut up of NFL throws, JJ McCarthy's cut up would be just as long and have just as many throws as most of these other guys. So I think that when you take that and you look at the quality of those throws, JJ McCarthy is absolutely 100% right there. And I think the question I have now that I've made that determination, and you agree with me, and we've been texting with some of our buddies around the NFL scouting world and the media scouting world, and a lot of them are like, yeah, no, I like him way more than I thought I would too, as they've watched the tape, is how do you then separate them back out? That question starts with, like, obviously we're going to have the personality stuff, and there's going to be stuff that we're not privy to. But from a football standpoint, which one of these guys fits best with what Washington wants to do offensively? It means what Cliff Kingsbury is trying to build offensively. Do you feel like you have any sense of an answer on that?
Yeah, I know. I mean, you asked me this question last night, and I think I stayed up a couple hours thinking about it. And I think the problem.
Sorry to ruin your sleep.
No, but I like that. That's like why I'm a psycho about this stuff. Is because like one of the things that I have a hard time with is I do think Cliff is smart enough to kind of adjust his offense to fit. Now, I kind of took it a different way. Basically, I said of the three guys, who would I be most comfortable starting day one? And there's a lot of people that would say JJ, and I think JJ is a guy that is interesting because of the thing you just talked about. Like when you watch his film, you're just like, oh my gosh, every throw, every window, every read is an NFL throw read. But then again, you get to these moments where you see his immaturity as a player. Now, I think he's going to grow, and I think he's going to get better, and I think he does have a relatively high upside. And I think he's got some NFL stuff, which gets me excited. Then I go to Drake, and I'm like, all right, well, Drake doesn't have the footwork fundamentals, right? But he does have that, like, Favrean kind of baller mode, which I love to see. And you need to have a little bit of that at the quarterback position. And then I get to then I get to Jaden Daniels, and I say, like, if I had to start someone, it would probably be him. And again, like, I don't know if he's got the highest ceiling. I don't know if he's got the lowest floor. But if I had to start someone tomorrow, I think it's probably him. And I think when you look at his composure, when you look at his ability to make tight window throws, and again, he's throwing to some of the best receivers in college football, but there was a gamesmanship to him that I can't overvalue, right? Like when the moment was big, he made a play. When like they got to have it on third down, he would make the play. And I think there was just a composure to him, the quick release, the fundamentals all seemed to line up, and then the ability to run the football. Back position, I think, elevates the floor of this offense. And I look at what Cliff Kingsbury did with Kyler Murray in Arizona. And when you're in the gun a lot, which I think they're going to be in the gun quite a bit, I think having the ability to run the quarterback, or at least threaten the run, is going to be extremely impactful. And so that's where I'd kind of say, like, that was my distinguishing factor. If tomorrow I had to start one of these guys, it would be Jaden Daniels. Now, that doesn't mean like longitudinally they're going to be the best player, but I just think that guy is probably the most ready to start tomorrow. And again, like Is it going to be perfect? No. But when I look at what Cliff does, one of the things that I thought was brilliant about that offense is a lot of times, they get in this 3-by-1 set, right? They got 3 receivers to the left, 1 receiver to the right. And they would just pretty much be like, if you like the matchup to the right, throw the ball. And he throws the best deep ball in the class. And it's not like we're running an out or a hitch. It's like we are running a go. And we're going to give our receiver an opportunity to make that throw. And that's a skill set that this guy has, kind of the best in the class. He throws the best deep ball in the class. So if that's going to be a big feature of what you do, I want to make sure my completion percentage is higher than 50% on that. And I want a guy who's going to be really accurate with that. So the running ability, the deep ball, given how Cliff handles some of that vertical stuff, it's not an option route, but like kind of alerts on the backside.
Yeah.
I just think that skill set's going to be really, really important.
Yeah, no, and so it comes down to like, what question are you trying to answer? Like, is it the best guy for day 1, or is it the best guy for day 5, or not day 5, a year 5, right?
Yeah.
Like in their prime, are we trying to get a top 5 quarterback, and do we think all 3 of these guys can get there? Do we think just one of them, but is it too risky? And like, this is both the positive and the negative of this discussion. And I think this is where some people, you feel like you're bashing the other guy. If I say I want player A, am I bashing player B? It's like, no, I actually like all of them. And that's why I think this is so hard, is I genuinely am at a point where I am comfortable with all 3 of them going at 2. Which also makes me comfortable saying, hey, if you can trade back and get more and then get any one of them at 5, then sick. Do that. And that would probably be better than taking any one of them at 2. But like, there's a lot of people that disagree. A lot of people that think Drake is like that dude, that Jaden is that dude. And there's starting to be a larger contingent of people that are like, actually, I think JJ McCarthy is that dude. And so it becomes very difficult to evaluate, because it will come down to the personality. It will come down to, are we looking more short-term, more long-term, and what is the likelihood that we can get our guy there? Because I think the guy with the highest upside, which is what a lot of people would tell you is the most important thing, are we going to get the guy? Are we going to get the perennial Pro Bowler or even all-pro level quarterback? That guy, the biggest upside guy, is Drake May. If I had to start any one of these 3 tomorrow, he's the last. I would start JJ over him, and I would start Jaden over him, and I wouldn't think twice about it. And so I don't know what to do with that information. That's why Adam Peters' paycheck is a lot bigger than mine, amongst many other reasons. But that is ultimately the conundrum, put as concisely as possible, is the upside and the short-term plays are literally the opposite guy.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because I do agree. I think Drake May, like when you look at the big time throw stuff, when you look at the kind of high level playmaking nuance, the kind of gunslinger mentality, like he's got it, man. He's got that factor. And it's the inconsistency stuff that gets you thinking, man, if he could sit for a year, if he could sit for 8 weeks, I think I'd be much higher on him. But I don't think they've built the roster at the moment to sustain him sitting for 8 weeks. Now, if you had re-signed Jacoby Brissett, or you had kind of gone out and signed a Gardner Minshew, one of those higher end backups that we're talking about, kind of that, the 25th to the 35th quarterback in the NFL, to kind of be that guy, to be that mentor, I feel much, much better about that. But for the construction of the team as it currently exists, I don't know if he can come in day 1 and like just lead you the way you need to be led. I think there's a lot of rawness to him. And again, like, he's uber talented, man. Like, he's uber talented, but there's an inconsistency with his footwork, his arm mechanics, the release, all that kind of stuff. And everyone says, oh, well, like Aaron Rodgers was like that coming out. And I totally agree he was like that, but he sat for like 4 years, 3 years, and then figured it out. And so that's something I keep coming back to. It's like, if you kind of put him on the shelf for a little bit, let him grow up. I'm really glad you brought up the JJ thing too, because I do think JJ brings, compared to Jaden, brings a little bit more natural arm talent. And that's because I think JJ's arm talent is special. Like when you watch him throw at the combine, I think that's one of the reasons people were pretty geeked about his pro day, is because a lot of the media members were seeing him throw for the first time in person, and you're like, sling it. And that's something we knew, or that I knew when I went to the combine, because you watch all the drills, you're like, the ball comes out of his hands differently than Bo Nix, Michael Penix. The only guy that's different is Joe Milton, and we'll talk about him in a little bit because he's a mutant freak. But he's kind of in that category of just elite arm talent, and he can run the football. Like, that's the thing, when you watch this film, like, he's a good runner, and I think he's a little bit more of a natural runner than Drake May. So in a year where you got to kind of survive that, having a lack of talent around you, I would probably lean him. But again, he's a guy also that I think would be much, much better if he could sit for a year. So that's why I kind of go back to the Jaden Daniels thing. Like, to your point, like, it's is that the right way to approach this decision? And I don't know. I don't have a good explanation that I would feel very comfortable day one with Drake May starting. But if it's year 3 and he's looking good and he's cooking, he's cleaned up some of these things, like his ceiling's by far the highest. And so that's where the conundrum comes in to me. It's just like, they're all good. They're all good in different ways. And it's just about what you feel that you can develop and what you can tolerate while you're kind of in the midst of a roster reconstruction, if that's kind of how you want to term it.
Right. And the thing is with Drake too, like if he plays, he can play and be bad and still be good in the end, right? Like the Peyton Manning example of setting the NFL rookie record for interceptions, and it worked out just fine for him. Like if Peyton Manning had sat, would he have turned into the same guy? Probably. Would it happen at the same speed? Probably not. Like who knows? Where there's other guys where you're like, man, if that dude hadn't sat early, I don't know that he ever makes it. Like he doesn't figure it out. He needed to sit, and we don't know with Drake. Like we can't possibly know with Drake, and it's not like we can play it out one way, then rewind the tape, and then try the other way if it didn't work. Like you only get one shot at this. So could Drake May be the guy and play through a ton of mistakes, and it's really ugly, but by week 9, 10, he's starting to figure some things out, and next year he's pretty good? Like that could be possible. Or do you sit him and just deal with Marcus Mariota being your quarterback, whatever that turns into, and hope that you can call an offense in a way that makes you competitive week in and week out? Like maybe that is the play. So I think that's really tough. I do want to, before we get even farther,
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I do think, like, when we say sit, I said sit, and I'm glad you made a little bit of a distinction there, because sitting is one thing, but also like insulating is another way to look at that, right? Like, can you pull a Russell Wilson with him where he's starting, but he's definitely a passenger to his offense, right? Tom Brady early in his career, where he's starting, but like he's not having to do the high leverage stuff all the time. And I think, like, looking at Sam Howell as an example, like they kind of did it the other way. They said, here's everything, figure it out. And there's merit to that in some circles, but I think the way that's more consistently successful is the one where they are just they're the passenger to the offense. So you could definitely construct that. And I think that they've done a pretty good job of getting pieces around him that offensively that would allow that to happen. But I do think that the offense would look, and again, they're all going to be passengers to a certain extent. But I think with Drake, it's like you need that kind of maturation period for him to ensure that he doesn't get cooked and that you have an opportunity to have that kind of top of the line quarterback opportunity.
And I think that's a separator. Jaden's in his own category here to an extent in terms of readiness. Like he is definitely the most ready, and part of that is his escapability, right? He gets out and can run, and like that's a safety flotation device in a year. Whereas a rookie quarterback in the NFL, it's good to have a safety flotation device. Yeah. But he's also, I think it's worth pointing out, like he's 23 years old, will turn 24 during the season. McCarthy will not, unless the command, whichever team he gets drafted by makes a run in the playoffs, he will be 21 the entire season. He doesn't turn 22 till next January. So when we talk about readiness and like maturation and all that kind of stuff, like it makes sense that Jaden is ahead of these other guys. But I think that like when I look at JJ and Drake, to take Jaden out of it for a point of comparison, one of the biggest flaws in May's game is one of, to me, the biggest strengths in McCarthy's, which is JJ has this ability, and I noticed this, you sent me a great cut up of like almost every throw of his from 2023. And so you're able to just watch throw after throw after throw after throw. He has an instinctual ability to find the soft spot in the pocket. And like, no matter where that in that parabola, that U shape of the pocket is the center that is the safest. He has an ability to feel that and kind of float to it, and then just keep his feet and rip a ball somewhere. But that, like, I think if I'm an offensive lineman and I watch JJ McCarthy, I'm like, that's the guy I want, because he is going to make me look really, really good. Meanwhile, Drake May, when you watch him drop in the pocket, he is all over the damn place. Like he floats into pressure all the time. And so if I think of the things that could derail a game, a season from a young quarterback, like what gives us a chance, that single characteristic from JJ McCarthy is like a huge green flag, where it's a pretty big red flag for Drake. And to bring Jaden back in the conversation, his sack to pressure ratio, he's got like 2 of the worst 10 seasons ever in the SEC. Yeah. And so you combine that with the weight, which, as we talked about with Nate Tice, like the weight is not a durability factor. It's a sack prevention factor as much as anything. Like that is an interesting data point that, again, there's a lot of different data points. This isn't to say that this settles the argument it's JJ McCarthy, but like on the sack killing drive, like ability to take pressure, ability to avoid pressure, line of the evaluation, it's a huge check mark. And I think that's one of his great strengths to go along with the arm talent. And I think that there is an element of that is uncoachable and natural because it's a feel thing. And to watch him consistently do it well, I think is really, really impressive and is one of the reasons why I feel pretty good about lumping him in the category with two guys who seem more talented and have been ahead of him for a lot of the process.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And another kind of point with JJ is like it's all NFL concept, it's all NFL throws, it's all NFL windows, and it's so hard for me as an evaluator to remove that bias from my evaluation because I'm like, that is NFL Sunday, that is NFL Sunday, and it doesn't mean that the other guys can't do it, but it's just in your face in a way. Like when you watch those cut ups, you're like, this is 3rd and 8. He's hitting mesh, but he's like the second crosser, and like he's anticipating this throw, or they're hitting drive, and the back's bursting and pulling the linebacker. He's anticipating this throw, or they're running, like, and it's not wide, but let's say FI cross, and he's hitting the crosser on the back shoulder and open, and he's creating open throws and opportunities for these guys. And again, like you watch the Bowling Green game, he looks like the worst quarterback in America, but there are like the consistency of it. You're just like, oh my gosh, like that's why NFL teams are excited. That's why NFL evaluators are excited, I think. And I also think it's important to note that one of the reasons this JJ McCarthy hype is happening now is because this is when coaches get in on the evaluation, right? This is when they start watching film, and you better believe those dudes are like, we run that concept. Like, for example, there was a play that he was running the other day, which was CO. So it's an out and a corner, and it was versus cover 2. And no other quarterback in this group that we're talking about has done this. He looks to the flat, the corner attacks the flat, and then he rips a fastball to the corner. So
I remember the play.
In terms of manipulating coverage with your eyes and having a feel for the pocket, like it's pretty damn good. Now, is that NFL translatable? He's on this team that's got 20 guys going and they're going to get drafted this year. I understand. But when you watch the film, it's so hard to get away from that. And I just want to talk to the Jaden Daniels point real quick about the sack to pressure ratio. Not all sacks, especially when you watch them, and I think John Keim brought this up, so shout out to John Keim, but like not all sacks are created equal. So when you go watch his sacks, there's protection busts, there's guys losing quick, there's stuff like that. And also he's a playmaker, with his legs in a way that the other guys aren't there, and those guys traditionally have higher sack rates. So because he's so dynamic as a runner, you're going to have a give and take there. I'm not sure, like when you watch his cut-ups, when you watch his film, I'm not sure that that's problematic in the same way it is problematic for Drake May, where, to your point, Drake May is sometimes finding pressures where you're like, don't do that. Like, that's not what we need here. And I think like that's where I would kind of differentiate those other guys. Obviously, I think JJ does it the best in terms of sack to pressure ratio. Then there's Jaden, but Drake, there's times where, again, I like his film. I like the playmaker. I like what he brings. I like the moxie, but in terms of like being super polished, he's not, which makes me think he's a little bit more developmental than people want to kind of give. Again, uber talented, but that stuff where you're like running into a defensive end or you're stepping up into a 3 technique, it's like, what are we doing here, man? Like I don't want to say that's a fatal flaw, but that's a big deal that needs to get corrected. And it can get corrected. It's just how much time do you have to make sure that that's fixed before week 1 is the question with him. Again, uber talented guy. Love the like, again, we did the big time throw cut up. I don't know if I sent that one to you, but when you watch big time throws, you're like, this is the best quarterback I've ever evaluated, right? Like, because that's what he brings. But it's more than that. It's more than like the upside. It's also the low level stuff, which are like, and it speaks to some of the inconsistencies, which we've talked about a ton, you and I, over the last couple of weeks. The inconsistency is because of these issues. And that's the thing with him that gets you a little bit nervous.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing, just to kind of wrap up this conversation, or two other things, kind of getting back to our original point, how does it fit with the Kingsbury offense? I think there are pluses and minuses up and down. The one thing that I do think you see, and I would love to watch some more All-22 on McCarthy and kind of see, is this intentional? But there is a lot of underthrown deep balls. And if you're going to have to, like, he's clearly got the arm strength. Like, when you talk about ripping balls, like 30 yards on a rope. I think it's against Utah. It might be against UNLV. It was hard because I watched
A lot.
a lot yesterday, and it was against a red team. Now I feel like a child. They were playing the red team, but he rolls left and throws a touchdown pass to the back of the end zone. His feet are on the 20-yard line, and so it's a 30-yard throw because it's 10 yards deep in the end zone on a rope, and he's rolling left as a right-handed quarterback, and just like unbelievable highlight level throw. So that high level stuff is there. Clearly the arm strength is there, but he does underthrow the deep ball on occasion, or with some frequency, I should say. And his guys make plays, so it winds up on the highlight tape. But you're like, oh, that ball should be a little bit out in front. Is that an anticipation thing? Is that I'm reading a backside corner that's not in the frame thing? Like that is a question. But for Cliff, the guy who wants to vertically attack traditionally, I do wonder if that's like hey, not my favorite. Where Jaden, as you mentioned, has a little bit weaker arm overall, but he's the best deep ball thrower in the class. So I think that's an interesting dichotomy as well in terms of the fit. So I don't know if there's anything. There's one other thing I want to mention too on the mental side of it, but anything else from like a fit perspective that you think is worth mentioning if you're running a specific system, which guy you would lean towards one way or the other?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that deep ball thing, because sometimes when I watch the film, I'm like, oh, is he trying to hit the back shoulder here? Which is a thing that makes sense because of the type of receiver he has. He's got like a big body guy there. I forget his name at the moment, but he's draft eligible. Big guy, 6'4". Maybe back shoulder's more viable there. But if you watch him throw at the combine, he had a hard time hitting the deep throw. I think he had 3 or 4 opportunities. I think he was 1 for 4. And like he got to a point, and I think part of it is because his arm is so good. And what I mean by that is he's throwing like darts as opposed to kind of throwing these high arcing kind of opportunities where the receiver can make you right. And so I think he missed 2 and then throws one to Ryan Flournoy from Western Missouri, where it's like this, it looks like he's trying to hit the top of the dome, but the receiver can adjust to it. And again, that's where his lack of throw volume becomes a little bit concerning, I think. It's that type of stuff where it's like, yeah, you do this NFL read, you do this NFL window, you have the arm talent, you have the footwork, but like you just don't have the volume of throws to kind of know, hey, I can layer this one, or I can touch this one in there. Now, can he get there? Absolutely. But in terms of the thing you're talking about, it's like, and I kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, it's like, if we had to start someone tomorrow, who's it going to be in this Cliff Kingsbury offense? It's going to be Jaden Daniels. It's just the other 2 guys might have slightly higher ceilings potentially. Again, that's not a knock on Jaden Daniels because I think he's got a very high ceiling as well. But there are these issues with them that you're kind of like, can this get corrected? Can we fix this? And usually you don't want the guy starting day one who have some.
Yeah. So that's going to be the question. Is it a long-term? Is it a short-term? I Marcus Mariota than anyone in the fan base is, and certainly you and I are, but I also am kind of with like, I don't care what happens in the short term if you get the Pro Bowl guy in the long term. So, we'll see about that. Last thing I was texting, we're watching the highlights and it's the TV copy. And all of a sudden my pal Noah Eagle is calling a bunch of those. And so he's of course play-by-play for the Big Ten for NBC. And I texted Noah and I was like, I'm watching McCarthy and I like him way more than I should. And just kind of have that conversation going with Noah. And he said he is maybe the most elite mental college athlete I've ever talked to. So when you talk about the conversation stuff, and Noah's a younger guy. It's not like he's been doing this for 30 years, but like he's for the 5-6 years that he's been doing this, like he's been doing it at a very high level. Noah, very elite himself. So he's been around, Big Ten basketball, Big Ten football, some of the other conferences at a very high level, talking to a lot of really high level players, and McCarthy's the most elite guy. And we know that he's got like the mindfulness stuff and he does the grounding before games. And so he just has like a very, very intentional approach to mental health, and to his mentality side of his game that I think will probably ring well with a lot of what DQ and Adam Peters are looking for, people who are in control of that part of their game. And it's not as public in terms of how Jaden Daniels and Drake May are on that and care for that and all of that. But I do think that, just from like we know we can take the coaching because he was with Harbaugh, the processing, like all this stuff that we put in the mental bucket. Like JJ McCarthy is a really elite prospect, and that's certainly going to speak well to this group that is looking at that very heavily. And then it just becomes a matter of how well do Jaden and Drake score on those same things.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up the mental side because I think that's great. I think you see that when he's doing interviews too. The other thing I wanted to point out is I was talking to a group of people at the combine who'd worked with Jaden Daniels pretty extensively, and they were talking about like this VR system that they had developed, and that's what I was talking to them about. But through the conversation, you realize that Jaden Daniels is putting in like an extra 2 or 3 hours a day in preparation, to kind of get ready for each week on this VR system, and so like even though he kind of comes off as like a little quiet and a little aloof, like you talked about the Herm Edwards thing, like dude's competitive and dude's a worker. And I think like that's, again, they all have their elements. And I think like, I don't know anybody. I didn't talk to anybody about Drake May. I don't know him that well, but it's cool when you hear these guys handling themselves in that way. And again, it comes back to like, I think about this conversation, like we're literally splitting hairs here. It's like, well, this, but that. And you can kind of say like, oh, this is a plus, like that the Drake May has kind of got the most upside. That's a plus, right? We want that. And if they did that, I'd be like, good. If they went, oh, we felt most comfortable with JJ McCarthy because of the youth and because of good. And then if you said Jaden Daniels because he's a absolute baller and he can make plays, like good. Like they're all good. It's just about kind of trying to distill like what is the right fit here for this organization long term, because it is a big decision that's going to shape the next 5 years probably. So
No doubt. I will say this. We're not going to do okay, let's wrap it up with a nice, neat, who would you take? I would say Drake May is going to make me the most nervous, but I also get it because he's got the biggest upside. And we'll see what the other two have to either or not they wind up being the pick at number 2. We're less than a month away. And we'll continue talking about it with all kinds of people here on Take Command. All right, if you want stories from Logan's Pro Day as well as some other thoughts on the Pro Day stuff, check out the full episode of Take Command. Of course, we'll have more reaction on the show next week. Got some really fun pods planned as we lead up to the NFL Draft next month, including our all-freak team list, like Joe Milton at quarterback. Who else are the Joe Miltons of this draft? Guys who are just insane athletes. We're going to do that coming up next week. Next, though, the mental side of quarterback, we continue to talk about it, and the development side of it specifically. Boheim Jones, always interesting. He joins us next to talk about just that here on the Team 980. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And this intro song, Anthony Haney, really should be our top story of the day. Like, if we're going to do Not My Beat, I would actually air the other half of the conversation of what I'm going to air right now. Our sports main story of the day is that we are less than a month from the NFL draft. Pro days are complete, and the eyes now turn to which NFL quarterback or which future NFL quarterback the Commanders should take with the second pick, and which one of those guys would best succeed in Washington and how that comes into play. Boheim Jones, longtime commentator and host, of course, of The Right Time with Boheim Jones, the podcast that's out multiple times a week. He had some interesting thoughts on quarterback development on Twitter the other day. I texted him. I was like, you want to come on and talk about it? He said yes. And I was like, oh, by the way, also I saw your podcast talking about Beyonce. We talked about both things with Beyonce dropping the new album today, a revolutionary one. But we're not going to air that part of the conversation here on the sports radio. If you want that, we will put it in the podcast feed as a bonus, and it is online as well on YouTube at Craig Hoffman. But for the quarterback portion, I guess technically, Anthony, this would be Not My Beat. Here's my chat with Boheim.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who...
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app and, of course, streaming on YouTube at the Team 980. And it's our pleasure to welcome back to the show Boheim Jones to talk about quarterbacks and Beyonce, because that's what we're doing today, Bo.
Hey, man, Texas. That's how you put all those things together. Texas is the common leg.
Absolutely. So you had a really interesting tweet last week talking about how quarterback success is often linked, like the missing link is development. That and this has been a huge thing for me as we've spent umpteen hours onto the show and the podcast that I host talking about the number 2 pick and which take is like quarterback success is not preordained. Like, it matters what happens once they get drafted. That's kind of the jumping off point here. What was the larger point that you wanted to make, and then we can kind of chop it up from there?
I mean, my thing, development goes in so many different angles and places, and number one, I just like to make the point that this game is flawed in the sense that if you can't find 32 people just capable of playing the position of quarterback, then something's wrong, right? The most important position, you can't even find enough people to fill it out throughout the entire league, right? I don't think this game was meant for us to do all the passing that we do, but once you got enough people around who could pass at those levels, you had to give it a try, because once you got that guy, you can't beat him, right? Patrick Mahomes is that person as of right now. You got to try to find something that can put up the kind of points that you can put up when you have a player that is that great. But how you do it is the most fascinating question that we've got. And like my new one, because I can't remember exactly what I said that day, but I have one that I was talking about the other day about this, which is I have no answer as to whether or not it is better to play a quarterback young or to sit a quarterback young. I do know that since the Ricky Wade scale came into play, there's a greater incentive for people to put quarterbacks out there as young as possible so you can see what you have, as if it matters what you have in year one. What you really need is something that shows up by the end of year 3, because that's when you got to start making all those decisions. But the idea that you got to figure out what you got as soon as you bought it, that's the thing that make you order that package overnight when you know you don't need it for 3 days. You just got to have it, right? Like, that's where we are. But we got all these teams. The Chicago Bears have the number 1 pick. They've never had a good quarterback ever. They can't do it, right? For whatever reason, as a franchise, developing quarterbacks, they're not good at it. The number 2 pick goes to a team that's never been especially good at developing quarterbacks. And nobody other than who? The San Francisco 49ers of decades ago really have demonstrated that you can really develop a quarterback, or you truly have a system that makes it easy. Andy Reid, I guess, is a guy that's proven that he can be pretty good at developing quarterbacks. But nobody really knows exactly what they're doing. Or even anybody that says it is lying. I think it's probably the best way to put it.
Right. Well, and then there's the Packers, but just as soon as those guys leave the Packers, please stop paying attention to them. There might be some side effects. We don't need to go into that. Hopefully Jordan Love can break that cycle. But he sat, he's good. People are like, Mahomes, he sat, he's good. Peyton Manning sat and was awful and was good. Robert Griffin didn't sit, was good, and then was bad. You're 100% right. There's clearly no formula. And I think for me, as I think about for Washington, it's I don't think any of these specific guys, looking at Drake, Jaden, or JJ McCarthy, the three that seem to be on the board here, I don't think any of them are ready to be awesome in year one. And it's kind of what we lived through last year with Sam Howell. If they had not dropped him back umpteen million times, maybe Sam Howell's good. Maybe they win more, but they put everything on his plate. So there's even a way to like split the baby. The biblical story, by the way, they don't want you to split the baby, but there's a way to split the baby here that could lead to short-term and long-term success. And yet discourse is all in the extremes because that's the world we live in.
Yeah, let me tell you this. Step one, don't take J.J. McCarthy. That's step one. And look,
I don't know. I'm higher on McCarthy than I should be.
This is what I'm going to say to you about this, because
Okay.
this is not, I have no like football evaluation to make about him. I've seen, out of all of these guys, I've probably seen Jaden Daniels play more than any of them actually. And this goes back to Jaden Daniels at Arizona State, right? Like,
Sure.
I've seen more of him. I don't know if that's an NFL quarterback, but I thought he was an excellent college quarterback, right? Drake May looks the part. Caleb Williams, I mean, I saw his first real game, and that's when they brought him off the bench against Texas when he was at Oklahoma, and it was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And I used to root for Texas, so thank God he left. That was my feeling in that time period that we had. But McCarthy, all I know is this, okay? Caleb Williams is about 6'1"? He's a bit of he's what someone might weirdo, but apparently is just what a zoomer is. His game is not beyond reproach. He holds the ball a while. He doesn't like boom, 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 get it out like most people want. And not one person has looks the part, national champion J.J. McCarthy, and try to pretend like he should be the number one overall pick. That's how you know he shouldn't even be number two. If there was any whiff that he could be the number two pick, somebody would be out here telling us that he is the number one pick. Nobody is even doing that, right? I wonder if he is this year's Mac Jones, where Chris Sims came out here and said, well, it sounds like he's actually going to go to the 49ers. And then we lied to ourselves and convinced ourselves that that was going to happen when none of us for a moment had considered that madness. Not one of us had thought about it. And I wonder if McCarthy is a similar guy.
I do wonder if that's an interesting theory. I have not heard that one yet in terms of the number one, number two thing, because you definitely do hear Jaden and Drake. Oh, there's guys that have him above Caleb. You don't hear that with JJ. I think what's happening late in the process here is like JJ's tape looks like NFL was running an NFL system with Harbaugh. And so if you're an NFL coach and you're like, I know that concept, that's dragon, or that's a dig route that's in our whatever. That's like, and he just threw it and it was a tight window. Like, you see it and you don't have to do any projection. And the other guys, you're doing a ton of projection. And NFL coaches are creatures of comfort, which probably, by the way, gets back to the development piece.
Yeah, I just wish somebody would have the courage just to say, we're taking this guy. Like, Anthony Richardson was the perfect candidate for this last year, because he has some of the best film I have ever seen. And look, I'm not a film guy, right? Like, I hate when I say film, because I sound like I'm trying to sound like something that I'm not. You know those people. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
But he has looked as good as any college quarterback I've seen, and at points looked worse than any college quarterback I'd ever seen. I wish that team would have said, guys, we're not going to play him. He's going to sit here for a year. Carson Palmer's a guy that immediately jumps to mind, where Cincinnati made that call, like, look. And that's a dude that spent 4 years in pro offenses and did all that stuff. But there seemed to be a recognition, and I think that this is part of where they mess up in the development game, that being a quarterback in the NFL is so much responsibility and so much going on that it's too much to me, I would think, to ask for somebody to try to take all that onto their plate and actually play the games too, right? Like, I'm a big proponent of redshirting college football players for that same reason. You're moving 100 zillion miles away from home. You're trying to learn everything. No, take a year, wear that clipboard, get a handle on how fast these dudes are moving, and then go from there. Becomes a very interesting counterpoint, because if they had thrown him out there early, I feel very confident saying he'd have no business being out there, because early in year 3 it looked like he didn't have a lot of business out there, and then by the end, holy smokes, it looks like they did it again.
Yeah, no, his statistical season last year would have been the best Washington quarterback season in like 30 years, which, there's that. And as you said, he wasn't even good to start it. I think like that's like, I don't know. We get caught up in all these things that don't matter, which is why I always appreciate your commentary. Like, you come at things from, like, you have an economist backer thought process and the way you weigh things, pros, cons, whatever you want to term it. Like, it's always a little bit everyone appreciate that behind it. And there's a methodology. And I feel like a lot of football coaches and a lot of football people get caught up in stuff that doesn't matter. And like we even talked about it this morning on our podcast about how the interview process is going to be really important because if you get along with a guy, you're more likely to want to work with him, and thus that might be the separator. And it's like, okay, well, is that actually going to make him better? Like, are you actually good at the psychology piece where you're like, oh no, I like that guy and he's going to be successful? Or is he just kind of remind you of some of your buddies, and your buddies would be terrible NFL quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think that particularly depending on who the head coach is and like how much of an offensive guy you are or whatever, the way that you communicate with that quarterback is going to matter. Like the interview part is going to matter. But in the end, I think it's the coach's job to ingratiate himself to whoever the player is that's across from him. Or I don't know if ingratiate is the right way to put it, but to establish the rapport that is necessary for you guys to have the back and forth. Like that is the coach's responsibility. And I do think that a lot of these guys don't want to have to do that hard work of coaching. Because, I mean, to me, fundamentally, and this is something that's kind of interesting to chart as time goes on, as like people who decided they wanted to be coaches are more of like a CEO sort of outlook, right? That's a change in the last 30 years, but it's a teaching job and it's always been a teaching job. And if you ain't built to teach, to me, you're not built to coach. And so you're going to, especially now, I think we had a period of time where college offenses started to resemble pro offenses more. Now we're in this weird place where in a lot of ways pro offenses starting to resemble college offenses. But in the end, no matter who it is, you're going to have to teach that college player how to play professional football. And if you're looking for a guy that you don't have to teach, you're just looking to make your job easier. And we see that in a lot of businesses where people just look at it as like, I'm making the job easy. Like I used to, when I was doing these TV shows for HBO, it was always tricky in hiring writers because the head writer always wanted the person that they didn't have to teach, right? The head writer wanted the person that meant that they were going to have to do less work, which made perfect sense. Always mean you were getting the funniest person, right? Or even the most talented writer. People just want the thing that makes their job easiest. And that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, Boheim Jones, of course, the right time with Boheim Jones, out 3 times a week. You can check that wherever you get your podcast. He's with us here on the Hoffman Show. That's why I'm like actually encouraged by the staff. I mean, Cliff, I have massive questions about, but like, I don't know, he seems pretty smart on the offensive side of things. There's a lot of other stuff where I'm like, I don't want you running that, but offense, you seem to have figured out all right. But like a guy like DQ, I think gets that personality piece. And I think that's like Adam Peters, the general manager here, has a great reputation for that, where I look at some of these old school football coaches. And I'm like, I don't know that you're actually the best judge of character. Like that you can look at a guy and be like, oh, that's the right toughness. Where I actually feel like that's a strength of the Washington people. And that, by the way, is about as 180 degree of a change you could possibly have from anybody that's been here the last 25 years.
The thing I would say about Cliff, and I know offensively a thing that got Cliff in trouble in the NFL is like he didn't use enough emotion. He could get to be a little bit predictable, which makes sense because he's a guy who played for Mike Leach. I wouldn't call him a Leach guy. But, Leach was running everything off a no card. He could call a whole game basically off a no card. When Jimmy Lake was the defensive coordinator at Washington, he said he loved playing against Wazoo because he didn't have to practice anything. He just look at what they did before. It was like nothing ever changed, right?
Right.
But what Cliff will give you is he knows this generation. And I do think that kind of matters. And I mean it matters in a way, not just in like talking about like personally relating to people, but it also matters in terms, like I remember hearing him talk about like knowing how to manage the attention span of the people that grew up with these phones and recognizing that after a point, they start sitting there and they start moving their hands and you got to go look at those phones real fast, right? It's like a disturbing, disheartening thought for somebody like me. But I think that's a value that he is going to provide. I wonder that also in terms of talking about like the development of these styles changed for these younger people, and has the league itself come around to figuring out what those changes need to be, right? How are the offenses, how compatible are the offenses in college to the offenses in the pros, and that may be something that you would hope at least that Cliff would be able to do, and be able to help them find a balance on. But this is a structurally flawed operation from top to bottom. And that operation, I mean, is football, not just y'all's football team that is also structurally flawed.
Hopefully far less structurally flawed than it used to be. Couldn't be much worse. I do think when you talk about the league coming around, though, like this is Kyle has evolved on this a lot. Like I think Kyle was much more hard-headed I know he was much more hard-headed when he was younger, when he was here. It's something he's evolved on over the years. He's gotten a lot of feedback on it. But I know Sean, I mean, I covered Sean, I covered Kevin O'Connell, I covered some of these guys in this tree. Like, it's something they think about and something they care about and they understand. And so, well, yes, we all talk about their schematic genius and running this West Coast system. Like, I think a lot of the success of the Shanahan, McVay, whatever you want to call it, tree is that they actually have the emotional intelligence to do the connection and do the teaching. And when you can do the teaching, the players actually learn the thing, and then they do it on Sunday.
Yeah, but I also think that those guys who quarterbacks need to learn to teach a little more as opposed to getting in their ears and telling them everything that they need to do until it cuts off 10 seconds before the snap and then go from there.
Sure.
Like, that was the question with McVay and Jared Goff, right? Could you and let the guy do it, or frustrated quarterback yourself? Both of them college wide receivers, by the way. That's my favorite part. They're such frustrated quarterbacks. They didn't even get to do it in college. But getting in the ear, okay, da-da-da-da-da, and everything else, can you let it go and let them go ahead and do it? That's something that they're going to have to, I think, figure out. What I do think is great is, hey, man, everybody's gearing up to stop the pass, so we're going to hit you in the mouth a lot, and you're not going to be able to do much with that. Like, that's the swing that's coming, and that's the swing that's gradually happened as the Shanahan offense in particular has moved around. Is somebody's going to figure out the up-tempo smash mouth offense, and that's going to be the thing that changes everything and hopefully makes it easier for the quarterbacks.
Which is hilarious, because when the idea of that kind of came into the NFL with Chip Kelly in 20 whatever it was, people were like, this will never work. And now it's like, God, if he brought what he had then into the league now, because Chip at his heart is a running guy. Like,
yes.
Yeah, there's a bunch of passing stuff, but like, he wanted to run the football down your throat and just never figured out how to quite do it in the NFL. But like, that's a formula that would work.
His last year, he just ran like 5 plays every game. I don't know what happened. I was just sitting in my house, and I'm like, yo, I swear, they ran that. That's the 6th time they've run that today. And that, I should not be able to tell that.
Yeah. But, similarity is good. That's what Sean built the first offense that was really good on, is like, everything looks the same, but then we're going to do like 500 different things out of it, and you don't know which one's coming. But
right.
I don't know. That's a whole schematic thing. That's a different show. That is my conversation yesterday with Boheim Jones. There is a second half to that conversation that is not a sports conversation at all. It is a music conversation, but it does touch on sports and the idea of artistic courage, or at least some athletes, and the idea of artistic courage. It's about Beyonce's new album. Super interesting conversation. Always love chatting with Bo, and it was fun to get to go off the sports grid with him a little bit, as he often does, obviously, on his podcast. Make sure you check out The Right Time with Boheim Jones anywhere you get your pods. If you missed any part of our show, you can check out the Hoffman Show podcast anywhere you get your podcasts as well. When we get back, Clinton Yates joins us live, fresh off the set at Around the Horn, where he hosted all week. But it just means his takes, he had to keep them in. You're going to save them for us. We'll ask Clinton about his thoughts on Monumental Sports staying in D.C., about the Shohei Ohtani scandal, and he also did an amazing feature on one of the most interesting men in baseball. We will talk to Clinton Yates, the D.C. native, his weekly visit next here on the Team 980. Rolling on hour 2 of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And joining us from New York City, fresh off hosting Around the Horn, it is Clinton Yates. Happy B-Day.
What's up, sir? Anthony tried to clown me because I didn't have a favorite song off the album already. You know what I told him? I told him to turn on his television because I've been at work. Sorry.
No, the correct answer is actually the album's so long I haven't had a chance to listen to it enough times yet. Because even if you aggressively tried to listen to it, with your schedule, you still probably got 1 or 2 listens in.
Fair, but I was just saying I'm not going to be shamed for the fact that
I
haven't gotten it in. It's the whole weekend for it. That's the whole point.
Yeah. I need to go somewhere this weekend so I can just pop it onto the car. Although, let's be real, in my house, that album's going to be on loop this weekend.
Sidebar, we've talked about Broadway on Nashville before, and I don't want to get off on a tangent on this, but
I do, but okay, fine.
I would go, people are doing this. I would go to a rooftop Beyonce listening party on Broadway in Nashville 10 out of 10 times this weekend. I would do that. Like as a social event, that would be fun.
That would be one of the few things that I think I could do on Broadway in Nashville.
Exactly.
Other than that, I want to avoid that road, that stretch, that area like the literal plague. All right, so I feel like we should just do a whole separate side conversation on the album at a later date,
Sure.
not for sports radio. But anyway, for sports radio, I definitely want to get as deep as we can in the time allotted on the Ohtani thing because we haven't really talked about that on this show. And you know quite a bit about it, obviously, covering baseball like you do and being in LA like you typically are. But I'd be remiss if we didn't start local here in DC with the teams are staying after all. For as much time and energy and wind we spent on Ted taking his teams to Virginia, ultimately they come back and circle around, back up with Mayor Bowser and with the city council. Monumental Sports is staying in D.C. When you heard that news, whenever you heard it, they're prepping for Around the Horn this week as you were doing a great job filling in for reality hosting.
Thank you.
At least I presume you did. I don't know if you know this, but this show is on when you're on, so I'm just going to presume that you did a great job. The reviews were good. Point is, what was your reaction to that news?
So I'm not necessarily one to super dunk on people just because it's an available option. And in this situation, I don't feel the need to because it was so, to me, obviously off base to begin with. But the issue for me, Gregory, is always one of what did we learn about each other on the way to this process? I feel like everybody involved embarrassed themselves a little bit. And this is the kind of thing that as an owner, if you're connected to your own community, you have to have a better feel for it. How did you not know that people were going to be like, dude, you can't do this? It's as much about, I'm almost throwing the greed element out of it, to be fair. But just in terms of understanding what's going on in front of your actual eyeballs, how did this come to this? To the point that we're now sitting up in here looking at you tweet, oh my gosh, DC is renewed, this, that, and a third. I'm like, dude, you're playing in our faces. That is not appropriate. And it's just, I really wish none of this had happened is what it comes down to. I hate it.
I mean, I agree with you on some point where I'm like, I wish none of this has happened. But I don't know, maybe this is naive. But if this was truly a learning experience, and Ted comes out of this, and maybe even more importantly, Zach comes out of this, like just from a next, thinking 25 years from now, now that this lease is through 2050, if Leonsis and Monumental truly learned something out of this, and perhaps even other jurisdictions and cities and companies watching from afar, and people genuinely learned their lessons, it was ugly, it was not pretty, it was kind of embarrassing, but learning is good. That could be good. I do question whether that happened or whether they are just posturing here, but that is positing. I don't even call it devil's advocate because that implies that I don't actually believe that that's possible. I think it's possible,
I get it.
but you get what I'm saying here.
I do get what you're saying, and I also think there's a certain element of thinking that like other owners are new in town as well, and therefore these operations matter in front of everybody else. That's why this was also interesting. Let us not sleep on what is potentially happening with the Commanders in regards to how billionaire sports owners are dealing with the districts as a jurisdiction. That is a thing that people can see. It matters how that happens from an interaction level. So yeah, we've certainly all learned something, but I just feel like there was just no need to squander all that goodwill in order to come to this particular point in terms of where we ended up. And that's what my thing is, Craig. It just doesn't feel like anybody was operating in the smartest faith. And when you've got people making memes about your dead stadium deal, these people are elected officials in places where you were trying to garner votes. Like, yo, that is so embarrassing on a level that I just feel, frankly, Wizards fans didn't deserve. Capitals fans neither.
Yeah, I think that part of it is weird, but to me, the way I've kind of summarized this over the last couple of days is like DC did the work and Virginia didn't, and ultimately the people that did the work got rewarded. And not that
okay.
DC is faultless here in how this went down, but ultimately, like when Ted announced he's leaving, they had this plan of like, okay, well then this is what we're gonna do with downtown, and if you're leaving, like you're out of here. And
right.
Ted went back and read that plan and was like, wait, that actually sounds like something I want to be a part of. And then they had obviously done some level of work. Like there was ongoing discussions before Ted, tried to jet about what it would look like with Capital One as the center of a revitalized downtown. Youngkin and Virginia and Ted did an announcement with literally nothing but half-baked plans. Like there was no way to actually get to a finish line. And ultimately what happened is that caused a ton of problems. They circled back, and the reason they're able to, well, there's still some I's to dot and T's to cross. Ted's tweeting this morning about, hey, because some of the restaurant groups are like, well, no one told us that there would be no streeteries anymore, and he's like, hey, we're going to be reaching out today. Like that is the kind of detail that gets finished at some point during this process. Versus, yeah, we don't really, fans are going to park at Reagan Airport. We don't really have a great traffic flow plan, but like we'll talk to some people and figure it out. And by the way, we have none of the funding figured out. Like these are very small details that in this point of the process can be figured out. And that's because like Bowser, and for all the heat that she took, and Mendelsohn and the council for all the heat that they took, like they actually did some of this stuff in a way that Virginia just flatly never did.
Again, my entire point the entire time was, do not take what Theodore says at face value for real, because it likely will not materialize unless you have to give up something you don't want to give up first. The district knew this and therefore played it accordingly. And I don't think at any point that was ever in doubt to me. Whether or not you felt that such and such person deserved a new opportunity in X and Y place is a different matter than, well, it's worked here for a while. People kind of know how to operate it. You might not want to just blow that up for something that you have no idea how it's going to go. That was clear. That from a logistical standpoint was half the battle. But I still contend that from a cultural standpoint, the amount of goodwill lost in this attempt is, I don't want to say immeasurable because it's not that serious, but dude, like, come on. How are you going to come out here and act like you wanted to be here the whole time saying these crazy things in these tweets? I say this because I feel bad for good people who work for that company and that operation and the players. I'm not trying to get on all that. I'm just saying that if the guy who runs your shop is bouncing around different things and all of a sudden it just kind of feels like the emperor has no clothes, man. And it's really kind of weird.
No, it's definitely weird. And the fact that Ted was like, 3 weeks after we did the announcement with Youngkin, Bowser and I were having weekly meetings at the Waldorf. And I'm like, it sounds like you guys did an engagement post, and when everybody looked at the pictures, there was no ring. And it's like, that's
yes.
That's a bit funky.
Yes.
But
perfect analogy.
Yeah. Just all we had to do was zoom in, and we realized there wasn't a lot of substance to that. And here you are talking to your now actual future bride at the Waldorf. At least he's got good taste. The Waldorf's very nice. Anyway, Clinton Yates is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Last thing on this, and then let's switch gears to baseball, good and bad. The piece you wrote around Washington, and then the Ohtani story, obviously bad or good and bad in order there. You say there's goodwill loss, and certainly there is going to be some. My question would be, if the Wizards particularly are good 4 years from now, Winger and Dawkins are the right guys to run this thing. They hit on a draft pick or two, and all of a sudden you're in a Capital One arena that's renovated and is continually getting renovated, and the team is good. And Leontis is shown on the Jumbotron in 2029. I feel like he's probably getting cheered immensely. Do you think that is true or false?
I think that Theodore is a little too concerned about things exactly like that. Like whether or not he's getting cheered when he showed on the Jumbotron is kind of the whole issue, Craig. You know what I'm saying? Like, how about we worry about what's actually happening with the construction of your teams? I'll throw in there even the caretaking of a legacy, like a guy like Ovechkin. Let's worry about that and not worry about the principal governor or whatever they call it in the NBA's Q rating at any given moment. You know what I mean? Like, this is part of the issue with the whole thing, is that he tried to capitalize on a certain level of popularity that I think he thought he had that he didn't. We know this because we do. I don't know why he doesn't know this. And that's why it was so embarrassing. It was just like, dude, all right, man, nobody wants to do this. We want to do this. And like how that power dynamic has changed now that people know that he's publicly tried something and it didn't work. I mean, listen, do I think that's going to affect his popularity for 4 years from now if they're happen to be relevant? I do. But at the same time, I just think it kind of changes everything about like how you can approach your fan base from an honest standpoint going forward. I think it's a real thing, dog.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I definitely think that is something to be considered here. In terms of kind of even especially in like the immediate aftermath of the Virginia announcement, you're talking about the boundary stones and like all this very DC stuff.
Right.
You got in the district court, and and then the other part of this too is, and this has kind of been an underlying story this whole time, is you don't have Snyder cover anymore. Like all of a sudden, the football team is owned by someone that people like and is very, very good at the ownership thing. And so if you make a whoopsie, it's not like, well, at least he's not Snyder, because that guy's somewhere in Europe with not quite $6 billion in cash, because he owed a lot of people, but with a lot of money and no pride and no football team. Yay. Yeah. All right. Clinton Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, also host of ESPN Daily. You can check that out, as we always say, daily. All right. So I'm going to ask you the most basic thing about the Shohei Ohtani story, which is, what is the Shohei Ohtani story? Because it is so, like, there's so many prongs in this, and there's so many people who have their version of it, of the people involved, right? And people speculating on it. Did Ohtani actually have his own gambling debts? Was he involved in betting on baseball or other sports in a way that was kosher or not? How does someone get into his bank account to get $4.5 million? Who was this interpreter guy? Like, if someone is like, hey, I heard about this Ohtani thing. You do the baseball, right? How would you try to give them a summation of really at the core what this story is?
I'm going to say something just for the sake of pandering to the crowd, but if one attended RFK Stadium on a regular basis, you know what the DC Armory is next door. And the DC Armory happens to be where the Barnum and Bailey Circus used to come when it would come to DC. If you've ever been inside the DC Armory and seen the circus in that building, the circus certainly came to town, and the elephant is loose on the grounds. That's top level what's happening with the Ohtani situation in this regard. The Dodgers spent $1 billion on baseball roster talent in the offseason. They are the most looked at team on earth as a result of bringing Ohtani up the I-5 from Anaheim to Chavez Ravine. And it's blown up in their faces. We can get into the tentacles of it all you want, but like that's the honest truth about what's going on. I was talking to Plashke about this on Around the Horn today off camera, and he was like, dude, you got to get back here. It's a zoo. He's like, it's a physical issue. How many people are here dealing with this? And this is why this matters, Craig, is that the pop culture phenomenon is one thing, but that's a real baseball thing too. When dudes have to answer for a guy, or there's just tenfold more people around every day, and then the main person that used to be the attaché from you to everybody else is gone, and there's some other guy, so you've got to make new friends. Like, yo, this is a lot of balls to juggle, my guy. And like, I'm sorry, people ask me about like, oh, how many games do you think the Dodgers are going to win? I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just watching this soap opera week to week, because it just feels like, listen, they're great. 1, 2, 3, they're fantastic. They had a monster day to open things up, but it just feels like something's got to give here, man. You know, and that's kind of tough to watch, but it's also quite entertaining.
Well, that's the thing, is it feels like there's at least one more shoe to drop here. Like, there's how many investigations are we talking here? What kind of investigations are we talking about to make sure that Ohtani didn't bet on baseball, which is like a more serious? It's not actually more serious than it is in other sports, but because of the history, feels much heavier than it is in other sports, especially considering Pete Rose and the greatest hitter of all time. Now you've got a guy who is in a conversation considering his success of one of the greatest players of all time, that you're like, oh, you too?
Well, it's not just about Pete Rose in this sense. And I think you'll understand where I'm going with this. I think everybody feels like in order to get Pete Rose treatment, which is banned from the game forever, you have to have done exactly what Pete Rose did. I'm not sure that from an adjudication standpoint that that's necessarily where I am. Like if it, at some point you have to say, yo, bro, we cannot have this. Like, I'm not saying you got to sit down forever, but it's like this guy, Ipe, your interpreter, he was a part of the team effectively. Like, this was too close to home, I think, as a league to just sort of say, oh, my bad, and kind of skate on a language barrier. Like, to me, it's just a little bit more serious than that. And so, look, I don't know where this goes from an investigation standpoint, because I don't know how seriously I take some of these things when it comes to what they're actually trying to find versus what they're really looking for. But I do think that this is another situation. A lot of goodwill has been tarnished. People thought if you're going to be this secretive, presumably you're an awesome dude or whatever. And I'm not judging anybody for what they're doing, but sending wire transfers for gambling in California is still illegal. And like, whether it's ignorance or intent, that's not even the point. It's a bad look. And honestly, I kind of hate it for Dodgers fans, because the whole thing was, this is the year. Everybody's going to come here, blah, blah, blah. And now it's just like, it feels like, I don't know. It feels like an episode of Bonanza. The sheriff's coming for you.
I don't think in any audience outside of Dodgers fans themselves, you're going to find anyone feeling bad for Dodgers fans. But
that's fine. But I'm just saying, for the sake of the sport of baseball,
yeah,
it sucks. And that's what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
The guy is an international superstar. He's the face of the game. And we're talking about comparing him to Pete Rose in stupid internet memes. That is not what's up.
Not ideal, to say the least. I don't even know if this is a question that you can answer, but how quickly does baseball need to do something here? Because in some ways the waiting is the worst, right? And so we're here. Opening day was yesterday. We're playing baseball, and he's gonna be out there. And the clubhouse stuff and everything you talked about. Do you put him on a hey, we're waiting list? Do you just let him keep playing? What do you do?
Do you remember the analogy that I started the story with? The
circus.
Elephant is loose.
First, you got to catch the elephant.
Grounds. Right. That's where we are with this. I don't think we're in a position of asking when the show's going to start again in that regard. The dude who pleaded guilty in the case, from what I remember talking with Tisha Thompson, DC legend, for those of you who don't know her work, check it out. She said the guy who pleaded guilty, I believe, in the involved case somewhere down the line of all of this, it was 2 years ago, and nothing has happened since. So, what the actual legal timeline is one thing. What MLB's would be, I think, is another. You can take two stances. You can say, oh, we'll let the legal process play out, or you can say, we won't. And this is what we're going to do. I think they're going to take the former, not the latter, because, well, I don't think that Rob Manfred really wants to deal with this kind of a problem.
No, definitely not. All right, last but not least, let's get you out of here talking ending on a high note.
Sure.
I was lucky enough to cover Ron Washington when I was down in Texas. He was the manager when I was working in Dallas. And for those that don't know, I used to actually do baseball stuff. Very, very short amount of time. Your boy, now known for football and basketball, and kind of for ignoring baseball outside of when I talk to you. There was a time that was actually what I was known for in sports media. I was the Rangers clubhouse reporter down at ESPN 103.3 the first couple years of my career.
Amazing.
Elvis Andrus and I, that was my guy.
Elvis Andrus, what a pull,
dog! I will say, covering Adrian Beltre every day, that was great.
Yeah. Don't touch his hair.
Every single
Rule one.
Elvis tried. I saw Elvis almost die multiple times because he would not leave Adrian Beltre alone. But Wash was the manager of those teams, entertaining as hell, but just a baseball guy through and through. and you wrote a piece and did a video feature for Anscape on Wash. I can imagine why you wanted to do it, but like I'll ask you this instead. Like, what'd you learn about Wash? Because this is a guy that you've been following for a long time and certainly have researched and known quite a bit about. Getting to spend that kind of time with him in the context of doing a feature piece. What'd you learn about Ron Washington?
I think what I learned about Wash was the belief that the hope would never go away was real. Like, dude was motivated. My man is out here. Wash is not in cruise control whatsoever. And that, to me, was as exciting as anything. And that's why it was such a special moment to be able to present that chart and graph and sort of show him the literal path to where he had been through so many different black players over the course of the years in MLB. And it was like, okay, kind of an awkward situation. Let's be honest. Ohtani, Gonzo, Mike Trout, people think that he's got a wasted career. Tony Rendon, old friend alert, as we like to say.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a whole other thing in terms of his interest in the game. But like Wash is never going to be the problem. And not even close to that. He's such a kind of personality that people around that franchise, specifically that one, needed an injection of somebody who cares about the game that much. And I'm always going to appreciate that about Wash, no matter what franchise he's at. That happened with the Rangers. Let's be real. You know what I'm saying? Like that dude, the energy around that club and that franchise when he was there, different level.
Yeah.
You have got the World Series appearances to show it. And I feel that even for the Halos, if it's not a matter of whether or not you're winning or whatever, beating the Dodgers in the headlines, if people want to be around it, people want to be around it. That's the first step to having anything that's successful.
Yeah, if you want to balance the seesaw, and you got Tony Rendon on one side not caring about baseball, and you got Wash on the other, that's some balance right there. How about that for analysis? And they thought I couldn't do it anymore.
That's what you learned in a big league clubhouse.
Yeah.
Seesaw chalk talk.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Clinton Yates, he's talking about the biggest stories of the day every day on ESPN Daily, and definitely check out the piece in Anscape if you want to feel good about sports, which, you know, I think we need right about now. Clinton, always appreciate you, sir. Safe travels back to LA, and we will talk to you next week.
Always a pleasure. Never a chore. Have a great weekend, boys.
Appreciate that. Clinton Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we will talk a little NCAA hoop, and then we will talk to Dave Johnson ahead of the Wizards-Pistons game tonight at 6:15. Happy B-Day, happy Friday. It's the Hoffman Show. We got 42 minutes left of this radio program. We'll spend about 15 minutes of it with Dave Johnson. Do you think that Dave has a favorite track on Cowboy Carter yet, Anthony?
I do not think Dave has listened to it yet.
Oh. What's he waiting for?
I don't know. I think we might have to, remind him or let him know.
Yeah. Like, hey, Dave, after the game tonight when you're driving home, check out Cowboy Carter. That a lot of people think is the best track on the album. Yeah. Is that your favorite so far?
It is not.
Oh, what's your favorite?
My favorite is the Miley Cyrus Beyonce duo. I did forget the name of it though, so let me look.
Yeah, I'm now blanking on it. It's got like the 2 at the front, but I can't remember the name of it.
Most Wanted.
Yeah, but it's like 2 Most Wanted.
2 Most Wanted.
Yeah. Then I will say for me, I almost didn't get past the first track because I just wanted to keep listening to it because it's so deep.
Really
like
good as well.
Lyrically, there's just so much there. American Requiem is the name of that track, and I almost didn't get past it. Also, the memes about her rendition of Jolene are incredible. It was funny because when I talked to Bomani, Anthony, I know you haven't heard that full conversation yet, unless you went and watched it on YouTube, the Bomani Jones Beyonce conversation. But he talked about with Jolene, he's like, I don't know if I would have done that one because it's it's a song that everybody knows. And like, if you were going to say you want to do the history of country music, like you got to make sure that you just read the Cliff Notes. And then we recorded that yesterday before we saw what she actually did with it and what she did with the song and like changing it from what it was to what it is I wonder how Bo feels about it. I want to call him back and be like, yo, so what do you think about Jolene now? Because she definitely Beyonce'd it up. Not just like she didn't change the melody or anything like that. Like there's a little bit of musical change, obviously, but lyrically, pretty remarkable stuff. All right, so NCAA tournament, Anthony, we're going to go through the games real quick before we get to Dave here. There was some excellent basketball last night. Then there was also what UConn did. They just absolutely blasted San Diego State. Pretty much everything else was close, though. And by the way, you got the women's tournament back in action already this afternoon. Notre Dame goes down to who they lose to. And I'm blanking. Thank you. To Oregon State. So that already happened. Right now, South Carolina, the top overall seed, 34-0, entering the day, well on their way to 35-0. They have a 17-point halftime lead on Indiana, 49-32. NCAA men last night, though, North Carolina becomes the first 1 seed to go down. Just a really, really fantastic performance by Alabama. And it was a weird game early because Alabama just kept giving North Carolina open 3 after open 3 after open 3. And they're like, I mean, I guess. And then it felt like Alabama picked up the pace as well. Which I don't think people realize like how tied defense and pace is because you get slowed down when you have to take the ball out of the basket and the opposing team considers half-court defense. And so even though this wound up being a high-scoring game, like not giving up some of those open threes, starting to get a few stops, stringing them together, they would go on these spurts, and the game would get a lot more, I think, at Alabama's pace, up and down, up and down, up and down. I mean, look, North Carolina likes to get out and run a little bit too. They scored 90 and 85 in their first 2 games, but Alabama did a really nice job of just getting out and getting on the break and attacking the rim. And It just felt like they had the pressure on the whole time. And, I think this is the kind of game where if it's a 48-minute game instead of a 40-minute game, maybe North Carolina comes out with the win, but Alabama just ultimately has the last run, Ant. And lo and behold, down goes a 1 seed.
Yeah, they went down, all right, and there was some discussion about them going down in the post game. RJ Davis, he had a tough game yesterday. He struggled from the field. I want to say he was like 4 of like 18 or 19 or 5, whatever it was, but he struggled, and he got asked, what do you do, or what is the thought process following a game where like you sort of like struggle, and his teammate Cormac Ryan. He came to a defense and was like, they would not be there without him. They would not be there without Armando Bacot. Because he also he missed a couple of bunnies like down the street. He missed a dunk, some easy layups, some like routine things that they were accustomed to making. They just, didn't get the balance. So kudos to Alabama, going out there, definitely playing their style of game. And then leaning on Grant Nelson, the transfer, to come in and, hit some clutch shots down the stretch of the game. Because they had no answer for him. Like, they had nobody that they could put on him. He was killing them.
I mean, that was the thing. Like, he attacked. Like, that was the thing. He knew it. And so he gets to the line 13 times in the game, 24 and 12. You mentioned Davis in the tough shooting night. He's 4 of 20 and 0 of 9 from 3. I mean, I honestly, though, like, I commend the kid. He knows he's got to play. Like, he's got to keep shooting. And he's their best player and or one of their key players. And they're not going to win without him, and so you just got to keep going. And he did continue to attack as well, 8 of 9 from the free throw line, so he got to the line quite a bit. But if he can just get a couple of those threes to go down, totally different ball game. Unfortunately, he cannot. North Carolina ends up going home. So it'll be Alabama and Clemson? Is this a national football semifinal? What are we doing, Ant? Clemson got up big early. Arizona came back. God, Arizona has some athletes, dude. Some of the highlights in this game, you're like, good gracious, that's an NBA athlete. That's an NBA athlete. But ultimately, they get it done. And our old friend, Joe Girard III, hits a monster shot late. He only shot he hit all game. This was a very Syracuse Joe Girard performance.
Yes, very much so.
1 of 5. All 5 were threes from the field. But the one he hit was a big shot late that ultimately helps put Clemson ahead, and they're able to hold off the second seed in Arizona, and Clemson got to be at least their first Elite 8 in like 25, 30 years, if not their first Elite 8 ever.
Yeah, I don't know what the record is, but I don't know how Clemson keeps doing it, man. I don't know how they're doing. I keep counting them out, and they just keep, winning. And Joe Girard, again, like, for him to go out there and hit that shot after not connecting on anything all game, that was
it's
crazy
an off the dribble crossover right to left. Let me pull from 26 feet and just bottom.
It ain't easy, yeah.
No. And how they do it is defense, man. Like, they held Arizona to 37% shooting and 17.9% from 3. Arizona was 5 of 28 from 3. Not good.
Yeah.
Not good. Then you had Illinois and Iowa State. This one went right down to the wire. Monster game for Illinois guard Terrence Shannon Jr. He had 29 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 of 10 from 3, 10 of 19. I mean, 29 on 10 of 19. That's a good day. And he missed 5 free throws. Imagine if this kid could hit his free throws.
And he had to sit out a little bit because he was in foul trouble.
Yeah, 29 points in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Unbelievable efficiency.
Yeah. He's good, man.
And this game, is played a little bit to Iowa State style. Iowa State, one of the best defensive teams in the tournament. They hold Illinois to just 72, but they only score 69. And they tried to make it, they came back pretty feverishly in the second half. Won the second half 43-36, but they lost the first half by 10, only scored 26 points in the first half. And ultimately too much of a hole to dig out of, and down goes the number 2 seed in the East region as well.
Yeah, and Quincy Garrett, he's also a Syracuse guy as well.
Too many of them. Too many of them.
Too many to count. Hey, look, they leave, and they started like flourish. So go for him.
No Syracuse in the tournament. Yikes, bro. Houston and Duke tonight is the late game, 9:39. That follows NC State Marquette in the South region. And then we have on the Midwest region, Purdue and Gonzaga, 7:39 tip. And then Creighton and Tennessee is actually the latest game tonight. That is a 10:09 tip, the 2-3 game in the Midwest. As I said, the women are going right now as well. Incredible slate today and tomorrow on the women's side of it. Let me just get you the game times and everything as well. Gonzaga, Texas, and NC State, Stanford still to come tonight. NC State, Stanford is at 7:30. Gonzaga, Texas is at 10. Of course, NC State, Stanford featuring Cameron Brink, who is likely going to be the number 2 pick in the WNBA draft coming up in a couple of weeks. And then tomorrow, how about this for a lineup? LSU, UCLA. So you got Angel Reese and Haley Van Lith versus Kiki Rice, the DC native, who's the star for UCLA. Colorado and Iowa. I don't need to tell you about who's at the center of that one. Baylor and USC, Juju Watkins. And then Duke, Kara Lawson's Duke versus Paige Beckers and UConn. I might watch women's college basketball from 1 p.m. until 10 p.m. tomorrow.
You ain't lying.
9 straight hours. Inject every single minute of this into my veins. That is
I'm right there with you.
That is one of the best tournament slates that I can remember ever in an NCAA tournament, period, bar none. All right, when we get back, Dave Johnson joins us on the opposite end of great basketball. We offer you tonight here on the Team 980, Pistons and Wizards. It'll be entertaining, and we will talk to Dave about it next. Sorry, Wizards.
Kevin Sheehan.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Wizards and Pistons tonight at Capital One Arena. Let us go there now and bring in the one and only, with a proper introduction, of course, Dave Johnson.
Time to get the radio party started.
Blocked by Malone, pull it by. Oh boy, did he stuff him. Left wing pull, it's there. Oh, that's a pool party. Near the basket, slam right in. Oh, the steal and the slam. Intercepted by Kispert. Kispert now, foul line. Oh, slam. Ooh, that'll jar your preserves.
It's time for Dave Johnson on a Wizards game day.
Kuzma for three. Oh, it's there. It's there. Big shot.
On the Hoffman Show.
To the broadcast booth we go. Dave, how are you, sir?
Doing well. It's another night at home, which is nice because we're finishing with a heavy home schedule, and we really have had a season where we just keep coming home for 2 and going out for 4 or something. So it's nice to be home. Look, the fans. It was unfortunate loss in overtime, but the fans are appreciating the effort of this team. And again, you think about the 3-game winning streak. It could have been 4 had it not been for the overtime loss. But you don't look at that and say, well, that was a step back in any way. The other team, their shots went in overtime and ours didn't. But they were good looks, and that's the encouraging thing. So this team is doing what it can to just finish strong as a team. And again, that's part of, we talked about this the other night on Michelob Ultra postgame show, developing a culture, meaning that there are no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts, as Will Dawkins and Michael Winger have talked about, to getting to a team of sustained success. But there's also no shortcuts in how you approach each day and each game. If you are going to build that overused term culture to be a good one, then tonight's game means as much as Wednesday's or the next game. And you just have to take care of details day by day. It is boring to say that. But that's what this team is doing, and by taking care of those details, they're also getting some wins of late, which, you know what, winning is still fun.
Winning is fun, Dave. I highly recommend. The Pistons haven't done much of it either. They are riding an 8-game losing streak. And I do want to return to the game and some of the basketball stuff in a second. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, as someone who's been the voice of this team for 2.5 decades, and as someone who has called basically every game in Capital One Arena, being back home. This has obviously been a wild 3.5 months here, 100+ days, with the Virginia announcement, and then ultimately what you got to witness, the signing of the paper between Muriel Bowser and Ted Leonsis the other night. And I'm just curious, what the vibe was like in the building, and then any personal reflection you have of the fact that the Washington Wizards are going to wind up staying, along with the Caps and the rest of Monumental, at Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C.
I think it's great for the city, first of all, because and I have called every game in this building for the Wizards, or that's the first year I was doing it full time was the first year of this building in 1997, and so I watched as I drove in to games from 1997 on. Our downtown we did not have the nation's capital, a downtown. We did not have was created. I used to talk about how you don't see as many anymore because it's built up, but it was just a skyscrapers of construction cranes, and things were being built and things are being developed, and this is what an arena can do. I know it gets into a whole big argument, and you can have an economic professor tell you it's not worth whatever. I disagree with that, not being an economics professor, but this changed the city, and there's so many businesses and residential. It just didn't exist here. So you can't tell me that the building of at the time MCI Center was not good for the city, because unlike, for example, a football stadium, which, let's face it, is used 10 times a year, and then you're not going to get more than maybe 5 concerts, or there's only certain acts that can fill a football stadium. But this arena, we're playing here tonight. The Capitals are here tomorrow. The Capital, we're here again Sunday. Nicki Minaj is here Monday night. I was about to say Mary Blige, but anyway, Nicki Minaj is here. The point being is this building, and it's being used for events you don't even see advertised, that people rent out this building for meeting space. So it's I don't know what the numbers are, but I think it's close to 300 days a year this building is used. So look, if we'd gone to Virginia, if that's what it would have been, that area would have benefited, I believe, just like this area benefits. But I think it's critical from a city standpoint to keep something so important. And you can hear the passion in my voice. I'm not just saying this as the Wizards play-by-play announcers, but cities across the country are hurting in so many ways. The crime, whatever they're dealing with, and to lose something where all of a sudden, how are you going to replace it? And that's what I said all along, that given the current economic climate, given that in this city particularly, you don't have people returning to offices, quite frankly, like they have in other cities. You have so many office buildings that are vacant. We have a building next door that's bankrupt. So you can develop an entertainment destination, an entertainment district, because often the impediment to developing in the city is you can't buy property because it's too expensive, or you can't. But if you go to some of these building owners, I believe they're going to say, no, yeah, please get us out of our mortgage. And we've seen that happen in this city, where not in this neighborhood, or maybe in this neighborhood, but I know somebody was telling me a story about, some office building, they just walked away from a $100 million mortgage because nobody's leasing space.
Dave, how many pennies can we scrounge together? Do you want to buy some office space?
Right.
What can we do with office space?
Well, this would be the time to do it, although not here, because, again, this is a 180 now.
Well, no, we got to get in now. They start construction,
yeah,
the price is going up. It's only going to go up, Dave. At least that's what
correct.
Jim Van Stone told me on the show yesterday. It's only going up.
Now, see, you've got to. Now you got people that are smarter than I am. I'm not an economics professor. I'm just struggling. But by the way, your friend Adam said to say hello from Chicago.
Excellent.
That's
I'll shoot him
Monday. I wasn't on the show with you on Wednesday, but
no,
it's good for the city. It's good for the city, and this area does this building. It's been 27, 8 years, whatever it's been. This building does need to be spruced up, and because we're in a competitive environment, if the building in whatever city is better, then we've got to be better, and we're also competing with other teams in this market. I mean, it's a friendly rivalry, but we want people coming to Capital One Arena.
Yeah, no doubt. And you want them to see good basketball, and obviously that is a long-term work in progress. But on the short term, Dave, when the Wizards have had couple of their brethren, unfortunately, at the bottom of the NBA standings on the schedule recently, they haven't exactly woken up for the games. When you think back to what Brian Keefe and Kyle Kuzma and other leaders have said after those games, how do they make sure that they do not become the team that the Pistons break an 8-game losing streak against tonight?
Well, we did have one of those moments against the Pistons January 15th, but beyond that, it's been this season, very few moments like that. The Memphis game comes to mind because Memphis was so shorthanded. But I don't think I don't sense that'll be a problem tonight. Again, it's something they're aware of, but they're not. They're finally home for a stretch. They don't ever Sean Holmes tonight. That is a big blow because, again, part of this Wizards team would have more than 14 wins. I'm not saying would be a playoff contender, but rebounding was the big issue. And we've shown that we can compete on the boards or win on the battle of the boards because when you're talking about improving on defense, well, part of defense is rebounding. So, you look at what they've done, exceptionally well of late. It's been, hard work on the boards, adding to their and they've been a better defensive team the last 10 games or so. So these are the, stories within a season that the Wizards are developing as they try to finish strong. It's down to, 9 games or something like that. And you have a bunch of players that are still busting through their skin that want to show that they belong either here or in the NBA.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Dave Johnson with us from Capital One Arena. Pre-game, just over 15 minutes away. Dave, have a great call. Enjoy the game tonight, and we will talk to you next week.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it as always. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Dave Johnson with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, we wrap things up for the weekend here on the Team 980. I was wondering if you'd play this or just go with another Cowboy Carter track. It's kind of the thing where on a Friday, there are no wrong answers, especially at this point. This is our last segment because Dave and Glenn and Wizards basketball is next here on the Team 980. Anthony, you got anything fun planned for the weekend? Anthony, you have to stop dancing and speak now.
My bad.
So it's a radio show predominantly.
What was your question?
I said, what? Really?
Nah, you asked if I had anything planned for the weekend. But I really was jamming out in here.
I know I saw that part.
For the weekend, I'm going to go hang out with one of my friends who just had Achilles surgery.
Ooh.
He's been in the house the last 2 weeks or so. So
been in the
we
house
want to go out there.
bored.
We want to go out there and show him some love. And then, my brother's birthday is this weekend. Duh.
Happy birthday to your brother.
I'm going to this. Have you heard of Park at 14th?
Yes, I have heard of Park.
I will be going to Park on Sunday for brunch, but it's at 4:15. So is it really still brunch?
No, that's absolutely not brunch.
Thank you.
I mean,
Sure.
you can have whatever food you want, but brunch, by definition, is breakfast and lunch. And there's no
that's
part
what
of
they'll
breakfast
be
that is
serving though.
Yeah, like the food. You can have brunch food. I don't know that I'd call that like happy hour.
I don't even know what. I mean, we will be having happy hour. The mimosas will be flowing, Craig. That is what I will tell you. And for everything else, I don't really know. I think I'm gonna have to eat beforehand because it is also Easter. So I think I'm gonna go to church.
Oh, yeah, no, that right. As someone who doesn't celebrate that holiday,
Yes.
because it's not one of my people,
Mhm.
I forget that that's a thing.
Yeah, Easter Sunday. Usually,
Take me
You-
through
you go
Easter
in your-
Sunday in the Haney household.
when I was a kid. Oh,
Sure.
we were putting on our Easter's best. So you talking about slacks? We talking about a blazer, a tie, a nice white shirt. Like these were Easter Sunday fits. Now, I don't know. I think I might go casual. I think I'm gonna go with a polo, some slacks, maybe some McQueen, some casual shoes. Maybe not the McQueens.
I was about to say McQueen's casual. I don't know.
I mean, I'm
I
not
get what
gonna.
you're saying,
I'm
though.
not. I'm not putting on black bottom shoes or brown
Right.
shoes.
They're not dress
Uh,
shoes, but they are
yeah.
McQueen's.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm gonna do
That's pretty
in
solid.
my adult life. Now, when I have kids down the road, they will definitely be in their Easter
Back in the suit. You're getting
Yeah, they're back in the suit. Yep.
Nice. I'm like, what am I doing this weekend? We're going on a date tomorrow night.
Uh-oh.
Keep dating your spouse
You
even after
got
you're
to.
married.
You got to.
So we're going on a date tomorrow night. Rachel's got some other stuff she's got to do before we go on our date. So my butt's gonna sit on the couch and watch a lot of basketball. Probably go
Nice.
running in the morning with whatever's left of my legs after the workout I did today. I looked at the coach of the class that I took this morning, and it's one of our friends, and I looked at Alex and I went, "This is not gonna feel good on my long run tomorrow. It's gonna hurt. I might postpone it till Sunday. I might just run on
we could have
Sunday."
did tomorrow?
What's that?
We could have hooped.
Not on these legs. If you give me heads up so I can plan to not have dead legs going into the weekend, perhaps.
I will try to plan, but I'm a very busy person. This is one of my chiller weekends.
Yeah.
Because after
Well,
the next weekend,
also it can't really be in the next month
okay,
because
that's fair.
I'm running a half marathon on May 5th. So I need to both from I don't want to get hurt because I'm old now and that's a consideration. And I got to make sure that I get certain amounts of distance running in, like a training regimen. There's only so much freedom in the schedule.
Yeah. On Cinco de Mayo, though, half a marathon. That's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
I'm sure a lot of people will have lots of margaritas to celebrate after.
Yes.
I'm very interested in the chips.
The chips and the salsa.
You get to the finish line. I would like some carbohydrates. I would like chips. I mean, we can go because they start stupid early. It's so annoying.
You'll be done at 10, 11.
Yeah, you get done. Yeah, no, earlier than that, Lord willing. My goal is to run sub 2 hour.
Okay.
So if I run sub 2 hour, I think it's like a 7 a.m. start. So I'll be done like 9 o'clock. Like what I'm trying, I gotta go get some migas, some go to a Mexican spot, get some good quality, God, what's the other Mexican breakfast that I'm totally huevos rancheros? Like give me both, honestly. At that point, I'll just run 13 miles.
You'll be good.
Follow it up immediately. Hey, thanks for breakfast. Don't bring the check yet. I'd like to order lunch.
Mm-hmm.
I would take the largest burrito that you have. Fill it with all the rice, all the beans, and all the land.
Gots to have it.
And then I'm gonna go take a nap. Do we have things for real things? Also,
Yes.
anything else from a housekeeping standpoint we need to take care of before we end this silly radio show?
If people want to come see you on Monday, you should tell them where.
Oh, that's right, Anthony. Why did you remind me the entire day? How are we mentioning this now with whatever minutes left in the show?
Great point.
Son of a biscuit. We're going to beat the Green Turtle on Monday. So people should come hang out. It's Nats opening day, the home opener, obviously. Obviously, if you're going to the game, it's going to be a little hard to come to our show, depending on how fast the game goes. If the game goes quickly, then you could come after. Or if things get out of hand and you leave the ballpark early, you can come after you leave the ballpark and catch the tail end of the show in person. But if you just want to hang out and watch the game on TV and tell your boss that you're skipping work early because it's opening day and your boss is cool like that, you can actually just skip opening day and come straight to the Green Turtle. And we're not going to be talking about the Nationals because I figured that everyone who wants to talk about the Nationals is going to go to the Nationals game. So it's not a shot at the Nationals. We're just going to celebrate by talking football and basketball and all the other stuff. So that'll be Monday. We'll be at the Green Turtle. You walk in, you kind of go towards the back area, and we'll be sitting there at a table. There'll be a camera. Are you coming or are you in studio?
So I'll be at the Green Turtle from 1 to 4, and then me and Essex will swap so I can run the board.
Oh,
Yeah.
because last year you were
I was there.
with me, which is very rare on a remote, which is fun. I like having you with me on remotes, but I also like you hitting the buttons. But Essex, I also trust Essex to hit the buttons. So if it's
We'll
easier
figure it
for
out
you,
there.
because also then there's got to be a transition time.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking to our boss about.
Yeah,
But I'm going to figure it out. You know, I'm super flexible. They don't call me the super producer for no reason.
yeah, I know. I know we're not that far studio wise from the Green Turtle, but like someone's got you can't. I guess one of you. I guess like you could leave Russell early or
Yeah, I was
leave
gonna
during
leave
my
Russell
first
early, and
segment.
then Essex was going to go.
And then
over
once
to-
because you can't leave the board unattended. The buttons don't hit themselves.
No.
Oh, this makes me nervous for the logistics. Okay, we'll be at the Green Turtle on Monday. And hey, if you're at the show in person, you come hang out. You don't got to worry about the buttons because you're just hearing me talking out loud.
Mhm.
How about that for a sales job? It's time for real things.
Real things.
We're out at 42-45.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
It's Friday, Anthony. You get to drive. What do we got?
All right, here we go. We got a couple of things from yesterday's action. Should we start with Alabama head coach or UConn Huskies head coach?
Started with Alabama coach Nate Oates.
Let's start with Nate Oates. He had some word for Charles Barkley after their upset
The Alabama coach had some words for the Auburn Charles Barkley. Okay.
Yes. Here's what he had to say.
The effort. How about this response?
That was great. I mean, Grant stepped up. We were able to guard Bacon a little better one-on-one. You know, Charles Barkley called us frail. I don't think he was frail tonight. He showed up tonight. But, yeah, they stepped up big in the second half.
I love college basketball coaches. They're so thin-skinned.
Gotta love it, man. They pay attention to everything.
They do. Don't I know it? Don't you know it from where we went to school and who the head coach was when we were there?
Yep.
Good gracious. He's still whining. Then we got UConn's Dan Hurley.
Yes, sir. We have Dan Hurley talking about their margin of victory over the last 9 tournament games.
I mean, we suck at winning close games. So, you got to go with the alternative. No, I think the group, we got a killer instinct. We play every possession with great desperation. We got NBA level players that are incredibly well prepared. By Luke Murray and Kamani Young, who two of the best coaches in the country, assistant, head coach, just two of the best that do it. Obviously, we're very comfortable in tournament play. We're hard to prepare for.
That's a funny line at the beginning, but it's also one that's going to be if they lose a close game, people will be like, "Remember when he said
he wasn't lying?"
But hey, if you're bad at close games, don't have a close game. Then you got to worry about it. We got anything else? We don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah, we got Gigi Jackson from yesterday talking about his first matchup against LeBron James and how it went.
Did you get any interactions with LeBron today?
Other than him hitting fadeaways and f***ing us up, not really.
That was messing us up, the word that got bleeped out. Messing us up. All right. Enjoy Wizards basketball tonight. Wizards Pistons is next. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you on Monday on The Hoffman Show.